Madeira is a Portuguese archipelago located in the North Atlantic Ocean, west and slightly south of Portugal. Its total population was estimated in 2011 at 267,785. The capital of Madeira is Funchal on the main island's south coast. It is just under 400 kilometers north of Tenerife, Canary Islands. Since 1976, the archipelago has been one of the two autonomous regions of Portugal. It includes the islands of Madeira, Porto Santo, and the Desertas, administered together with the separate archipelago of the Savage Islands. It is an outermost region of the European Union. Madeira was claimed by Portuguese sailors in the service of Prince Henry the Navigator in 1419 and settled after 1420. The archipelago is considered to be the first territorial discovery of the exploratory period of the Portuguese Age of Discovery, which extended from 1415 to 1542. Its southerly marine position renders the warmest year-round subtropical climate in Portugal, with winters being extremely mild and summers long but with relatively modest heat. Today, it is a popular year-round resort, being visited every year by about 1 million tourists. The region is noted for its Madeira wine, gastronomy, historical and cultural value, its endemic flora and fauna, landscapes which are classified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and embroidery artisans. Its annual New Year celebrations feature the largest fireworks show in the world, as officially recognized by Guinness World Records in 2006. The main harbour in Funchal is the leading Portuguese port in cruise liner dockings, being an important stopover for commercial and transatlantic passenger cruises between Europe, the Caribbean and North Africa. Madeira is the second richest region of Portugal by GDP per capita, being only surpassed by Lisbon. History. Exploration. Pliny mentioned certain Purple Islands, the position corresponding to the location of the Fortunate Isles, that may have referred to islands of Madeira. Plutarch, referring to the military commander Quintus Sertorius, relates that after his return to Cadiz, the islands are said to be 2 in number, separated by a very narrow strait and lie 10,000 furlongs from Africa. They are called the Isles of the Blessed. The estimated distance from Africa, 2,000 kilometers, and the closeness of the two islands, seem to describe the similar position of the islands of Madeira and Porto Santo. Archaeological evidence suggests that the islands may have been visited by the Vikings sometime between 900–1030 AD. This is based on carbon-dated Scandinavian mice bones found on the island and the following extinction of various bird species. Legend. During the reign of King Edward III of England, lovers Robert Markham and Anna Darfit were said to flee from England to France in 1346. They were driven off their course by a violent storm and the ship went aground along the coast of an island that may have been Madeira. Later this legend was the basis of the naming of the city of Mexico, in memory of the young lovers. Its name was transliterated from the name of the young man in the tale. Discovery. Knowledge of some Atlantic islands, such as Madeira, existed before their formal discovery and settlement, as the islands were shown on maps as early as 1339, from a portolan dating to 1351, and preserved in Florence, Italy. The islands of Madeira appeared to have been discovered long before Portuguese explorers reached them. In 1418, 2 captains under service to Prince Henry the Navigator, João Goncalves d'Arco and Tristão Vaz Teixeira, were driven off course by a storm to an island which they named Porto Santo in gratitude for divine deliverance from a shipwreck. The following year, an organized expedition, under the captaincy of Zarco, Vaz Teixeira, and Bartolomeu Perestrello, traveled to the island to claim it on behalf of the Portuguese crown. Subsequently, The new settlers observed a heavy black cloud suspended to the southwest. Their investigation revealed it to be the larger island they called Madeira. Settlement. The first Portuguese settlers began colonizing the islands around 1420 or 1425. The three captains major had led the first settlement, along with their respective families, a small group of minor nobility, people of modest conditions, and some prisoners who could be trusted to work the lands. To make the island suitable for agriculture, they had to rough-hew a part of the dense forest of laurisilva and to construct a large number of canals. In some parts of the island there was excess water, while in others water was scarce. On 23 September 1433, the name Ilha da Madeira was first used in a document, followed by other papers and maps. Grain production began to fall and the ensuing crisis forced Henry the Navigator to order other commercial crops to be planted so that the islands could be profitable. The planting of sugarcane, and later Sicilian sugar beet, allowed the introduction of the sweet salt into Europe, where it was a rare and popular spice. These specialized plants, and their associated industrial technology, created one of the major revolutions on the islands and fueled Portuguese industry. The expansion of sugar plantations in Madeira began in 1455, using advisors from Sicily and financed by Genoa capital. The accessibility of Madeira attracted Genoa and Flemish traders, who were keen to bypass Venetian monopolies. By 1480 Antwerp had some 70 ships engaged in the Madeira sugar trade, with the refining and distribution concentrated in Antwerp. By the 1490s Madeira had overtaken Cyprus as a producer of sugar. Sugarcane production was the primary engine of the island's economy, increasing the demand for labor. African slaves were used during portions of the island's history to cultivate sugarcane, and the proportion of imported slaves reached 10% of the total population of Madeira by the 16th century. Barbary corsairs from North Africa, who enslaved Europeans from ships and coastal communities throughout the Mediterranean region, captured 1,200 people in Porto Santo in 1617. After the 17th century, as Portuguese sugar production was shifted to Brazil, São Tomé and Príncipe and elsewhere, Madeira's most important commodity product became its wine. The British occupied Madeira as a result of the Napoleonic Wars. An agreed-upon occupation starting in 1807 and concluding in 1814 when the island was returned to Portugal. The island was designated as a British Crown colony for 4 months, and Britain had intentions of keeping it after the Napoleonic Wars, owing to its strategic position, but plans for its permanent annexation were abandoned shortly after the start of the occupation. After the death of King John VI of Portugal, his usurper son Miguel of Portugal seized power from the rightful heir, his niece Maria II, and proclaimed himself absolute king. Madeira held out for the queen under the governor José Travassos Valdez. Miguel sent an expeditionary force that overwhelmed the defense of the island. Valdez was forced to flee to England under the protection of the Royal Navy. World War I. On 31 December 1916, during the Great War, the German U-boat, Mu-38, captained by Max Valentina, entered Funchal Harbour on Madeira. It torpedoed and sank 3 ships: CS Dacia, SS Kangaroo and Surprise, bringing the war to Portugal by extension. The commander of the French gunboat Surprise and 34 of her crew died in the attack. The Dacia, a British cable-laying vessel, had previously undertaken war work off the coast of Casablanca and Dakar. It was in the process of diverting the German South American cable into Brest, France. Following the attack on the ships, the Germans proceeded to bombard Funchal for 2 hours from a range of about 2 miles. Batteries on Madeira returned fire and eventually forced the Germans to withdraw. On 12 December 1917, 2 German U-boats, Mu-156 and Mu-157 again bombarded Funchal. This time, the attack lasted around 30 minutes. 44.7-AND-5.9-INCH shells were fired. There were 3 fatalities and 17 wounded. A number of houses and Santa Clara Church were hit. Charles I, the last emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, went into exile in Madeira, after his second unsuccessful coup d'état in Hungary. He died there on 1 April 1922 and is buried in Monte. Charles had tried in 1917 to secretly enter into peace negotiations with France, although his foreign minister, Ottokar Nyman, was interested only in negotiating a general peace to include Germany. Charles independently pursued a separate peace. He negotiated with the French using his brother-in-law, Prince Sixtus of Bourbon-Parma, an officer in the Belgian army, as intermediary. When news of the overture leaked in April 1918, Charles denied involvement until the French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau published letters signed by him. Nyman resigned and Austria-Hungary became more dependent in relation to its seemingly wronged German ally. Determined to prevent an attempt to restore Charles to the throne, the Council of Allied Powers agreed he could go into exile on Madeira because it was isolated in the Atlantic and easily guarded. Autonomy and recent history. On 1 July 1976, following the Democratic Revolution of 1974, Portugal granted political autonomy to Madeira. Celebrated on Madeira Day, the region now has its own government and legislative assembly. In October 2012 it was reported that there was a dengue fever epidemic on the island. There was a total of 2,168 cases reported of dengue fever since the start in October 2012. The number of cases was on the decline since mid-November 2012 and by the 4th of February 2013, no new cases had been reported. Geography. The archipelago of Madeira is located 520 kilometers from the African coast and 1,000 kilometers from the European continent. It is found in the extreme south of the Torre Madeira Ridge, a bathymetric structure of great dimensions oriented along a north-northeast to south-southwest axis that extends for 1,000 kilometers. This submarine structure consists of long geomorphological relief that extends from the abyssal plain to 3,500 meters. Its highest submerged point is at a depth of about 150 meters. The origins of the Torre Madeira Ridge are not clearly established but may have resulted from a morphological buckling of the lithosphere. Islands and islets. Madeira, including Ilha Acute de Agostinho, Ilha Acute de São Lourenço, Ilha Acute Mole, Porto Santo, including Ilha Acute de Baixo do Cal, Ilha Acute de Ferro, Ilha Acute das Cenaras, Ilha Acute de Fora, Ilha Acute de Chima. Desertas Islands, including the 3 uninhabited islands, Deserta Grande Island, Bugio Island and Ilha Acute de Chao, Savage Islands. Archipelago 280 kilometers south-southeast of Madeira Island, including 3 main islands and 16 uninhabited islets in 2 groups. The Northwest Group and the Southeast Group. Madeira Island. The island of Madeira is at the top of a massive shield volcano that rises about 6 kilometers from the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, on the Torre underwater mountain range. The volcano formed atop an east-west rift in the oceanic crust along the African plate, beginning during the Miocene epoch over 5 million years ago, continuing into the Pleistocene until about 700,000 years ago. This was followed by extensive erosion, producing 2 large amphitheaters open to south in the central part of the island. Volcanic activity later resumed, producing scoria cones and lava flows atop the older eroded shield. The most recent volcanic eruptions were on the west-central part of the island only 6,500 years ago, creating more cinder cones and lava flows. Madeira Island represents 93% of the archipelago's area, with 90% of the land mass above 500 meters. It is the largest island of the group with an area of 741 square kilometers, a length of 57 kilometers, while approximately 22 kilometers at its widest point, with a coastline of 150 kilometers. It has a mountain ridge that extends along the center of the island, reaching 1,862 meters at its highest point, while much lower along its eastern extent. The primitive volcanic foci responsible for the central mountainous area consisted of the peaks Ruivo, Torres, Arriero, Cidreo, Cedro, Caçador, Grande, Ferrero. At the end of this eruptive phase, an island circled by reefs was formed. Its marine vestiges are evident in a calcareous layer in the area of Les Miros, in São Vicente. Sea cliffs, such as Cabo Geraro, valleys and ravines extend from this central spine, making the interior generally inaccessible. Daily life is concentrated in the many villages at the mouths of the ravines, through which the heavy rains of autumn and winter usually travel to the sea. A long, narrow, and comparatively low rocky promontory forms the western extremity of the island, on which lies attractive calcareous sand known. It is a fossil bed, which contains shells and numerous bodies resembling the roots of trees, probably produced by infiltration. Madeira Island was formed from a base volcanic complex, forming to two massifs. Climate: Madeira has been classified as a Mediterranean climate, based on differences in sun exposure, humidity, and annual mean temperature. There are clear variations between north and south-facing regions, as well as between some islands. Other microclimates are expected to exist, from the constantly humid wettest points of the mountains, to the desert and arid Selvagens Islands. The islands are strongly influenced by the Gulf Stream and Canary Current, giving mild year-round temperatures. According to the Instituto de Meteorologia or IM, the average annual temperature at Funchal weather station is 19.6 degrees Celsius for the 1980 to 2010 period. For the 1960 to 1990 period, IM published an article showing that some regions in the south coastline surpassed 20 degrees Celsius in annual average. Porto Santo has at least one weather station with a semi-arid climate. On the highest windward slopes of Madeira, rainfall exceeds 50 inches per year, mostly falling between October and April. View from Pico do Arriero. Lava pools in Porto Monas. Porto Santo's lack of higher mountains results in a paradoxical landscape when comparing it with its brother island, Madeira. The desert is islands in the distance at sunrise. Cloud river formation between Madeira and mountains. Occasionally in winter it snows in higher peaks. Wildfires: drought conditions, coupled with hot and windy weather in summer, have caused numerous wildfires in recent years. The largest of the fires in August 2010 burned through 95% of the Funchal Ecological Park, a 1,000-hectare preserve set aside to restore native vegetation to the island. In July 2012, Madeira was suffering again from severe drought. Wildfires broke out on July 18, in the midst of temperatures up to 40 degrees Celsius and high winds. By July 20, fires had spread to the nearby island of Porto Santo, and firefighters were sent from mainland Portugal to contain the multiple blazes. Numerous residents had to be evacuated and firefighters were sent from the mainland to help battle the fires. In August 2013, a hospital and some private homes were evacuated as a wildfire approached Funchal. A number of homes were destroyed when the fire hit Monte, a suburb of Funchal. Biome: the Macaronesia region harbors an important floral diversity. In fact, the archipelago's forest composition and maturity are quite similar to the forests found in the Tertiary period that covered southern Europe and northern Africa millions of years ago. The great biodiversity of Madeira is phytogeographically linked to the Mediterranean region, Africa, America and Australia, and interest in this phytogeography has been increasing in recent years due to the discovery of some epiphytic bryophyte species with non-adjacent distribution. Madeira also has many endemic species of fauna, mostly invertebrates, which include the extremely rare Madeiran large white butterfly, but also some vertebrates such as the native bat, some lizard species, and some birds as already mentioned. The biggest tarantula of Europe is found on deserted islands of Madeira and can be as wide as a man's hand. Madeira has 3 endemic bird species: Xenos petrel, the Tricas pigeon and the Madeira firecrest, while the Madeiran chaffinch is an endemic subspecies. It is also important for breeding seabirds, including the Madeiran storm petrel, North Atlantic little shearwater and Cory's shearwater. Native Birds Gallery. In the south, there is very little left of the indigenous subtropical rainforest which once covered the whole island and gave it the name it now bears. However, in the north, the valleys contain native trees of fine growth. These laurisilva forests, called Laurasias madeirense, notably the forests on the northern slopes of Madeira Island, are designated as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. The critically endangered vine Jasmine amazoricum is one of the plant species that is endemic to Madeira. Native Flora Gallery. Levadas. The island of Madeira is wet in the northwest but dry in the southeast. In the 16th century the Portuguese started building levadas or aqueducts to carry water to the agricultural regions in the south. The most recent were built in the 1940s. Madeira is very mountainous, and building the levadas was difficult and often sentenced criminals or slaves were used. Many are cut into the sides of mountains, and it was also necessary to dig 25 miles of tunnels, some of which are still accessible. Today the levadas not only supply water to the southern parts of the island but provide hydroelectric power. There are over 1,350 miles of levadas and they provide a network of walking paths. Some provide easy and relaxing walks through the countryside, but others are narrow, crumbling ledges where a slip could result in serious injury or death. Two of the most popular levadas to hike are the Levada do Caldeirão Verde and the Levada do Caldeirão do Inferno, which should not be attempted by hikers prone to vertigo or without torches and helmets. The Levada do Canacal is a much easier walk, running 7.1 miles from Maracás to the Canacal Tunnel. It is known as the Mimosa Levada because mimosa trees are found all along the route.